So let's talk about AI. It feels like it's everywhere right now, doesn't it? The headlines are all about this AI explosion. But here's the thing that's kind of weird. Computers have been around forever, pretty much since the 40s. And the basic idea of AI, that goes all the way back to the 50s. Which begs the question, why now? How come for decades AI was basically just stuff you saw in the movies, science fiction, and then boom, almost overnight, it's real. It's on our phones, it's in our work. To really get our heads around this so-called explosion, we need to rewind. We have to go way back to the beginning, to look at that first big idea, and crucially, why it completely failed. All right, so let's dive into this first era. You have to put yourself in the shoes of those early pioneers. They had this idea about creating intelligence that, well, it was super logical, very human. Their basic belief was that we could just write it all down. The thinking went something like this. What if we could create the world's biggest instruction manual? Just a massive set of if-then rules. If you see a cat, then it has whiskers. If you see a sentence, then it follows grammar rules. The goal was to program a machine to think by codifying all of human knowledge, one single rule at a time. And on the surface, that totally makes sense, right? Except, it ran headfirst into a huge, messy problem.
Turns out, the real world just doesn't follow the rules. It refuses to fit into our neat little boxes. I mean, think about it. How do you write a rule for sarcasm or for a joke? What about the difference between someone saying, "I'm fine," and "I'm fine"? There's no if-then statement for that. The truth is, reality has an infinite number of exceptions, and this whole top-down rule-based system was way too fragile. It would just break.
So let's be clear. The idea of AI wasn't the problem. It didn't fail because it was a bad idea. It failed because all the things it needed to work just didn't exist yet. There was no massive digital library for it to learn from, no data. The computers themselves were ridiculously slow. But the biggest problem of all, the real showstopper, was the approach. It was fundamentally flawed. We were trying to tell machines how to think, just feeding them all the answers, instead of teaching them how to learn for themselves. Okay, so picture this. While the actual field of AI is basically stuck going through this period people call the AI winter, something else is happening completely separately, in the background. A really slow but steady and absolutely essential revolution was underway. It was building the very foundation that AI was going to need one day, even if nobody knew it at the time.
And this progress, it wasn't glamorous at all. You wouldn't see any big headlines about it, but each decade quietly added another crucial piece to the puzzle. In the 70s, processors started getting way faster. In the 80s, storing data suddenly became cheap, insanely cheap compared to before. Then the 90s gave us the internet, which connected the whole world, and all of that led us straight into the 2000s and the start of the data explosion. And this right here, this is the key. Every single time we did a search online, every photo we uploaded, every comment we posted, we were creating a tiny piece of data. We didn't know it, but all of us together were building the biggest, richest textbook in human history. For the first time, machines actually had something to learn from. The fuel was finally there, but we still needed a totally new kind of engine to use it.
And this is the moment where the light bulb goes on. This is the big pivot. Researchers finally realized that this whole top-down approach of programming intelligence just wasn't working. They needed to flip the script. They needed to let intelligence emerge from the bottom up. And that led to this fundamental shift, away from telling a machine what to think and towards training it how to learn. Just look at the difference here. It's night and day. The old way was all about programming explicit rules. It was rigid. You had to tell it everything. But this new way, what we now call machine learning, is all about being flexible. You don't give it rules anymore. Instead, you give it, say, 1,000,000 pictures of cats, and you just tell it, you figure out what a cat is. You let the machine find its own patterns. It's not just a new technique, it's a completely different philosophy.
So you have this brand new philosophy, and you combine it with those decades of quiet, invisible progress we talked about. And all of that led to one single, explosive moment. A tipping point. It all came together in 1 year, 2012.
So what was so special about 2012? It was basically the perfect storm. For the very first time in history, these three critical pillars finally lined up. First, you had the massive data. That was the gift of the internet. Second, you had the powerful computing hardware. And weirdly enough, it came from the video game industry, these GPUs that were just perfect for the math involved. And third, you had better, smarter algorithms. These new deep learning models that could actually make use of all that data and all that power.
So this is so important to understand. AI didn't suddenly get invented in 2012. Think of it more like all the ingredients, which have been slowly collected over 50 years, were finally on the counter in the same kitchen at the same time. The recipe, the core idea, wasn't new, but the ability to actually cook the meal, that was brand new.
And after 2012, well, that's when the floodgates opened. It was a cascade. Once that foundation was solid and that new engine was fired up, progress stopped being this slow, straight line. It went exponential.
And you can see that cascade happen in steps, each one building on the last. First, AI learned to see. It got so good it could recognize images with incredible accuracy, sometimes better than a person. Then it learned to hear. That's what powers the voice assistants we all use. From there, it learned to understand, to actually process and comprehend human language. And then came the final jaw-dropping leap. Once it could understand, it learned to create, to generate totally new text, new images, new ideas. And that is why this all feels so sudden. If you've ever seen an exponential curve, you know it's basically flat for a super, super long time. Progress is happening, sure, but it's almost invisible. And then it hits an elbow, and it just shoots straight up. For about 50 years, we were living on that long, flat part of the curve. Right now, we're living in the vertical takeoff. So really, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this right here. What we're all experiencing right now isn't the sudden invention of some brand new technology. Not at all. It's the moment that a technology, one that's been quietly bubbling under the surface for decades, finally got powerful enough to be useful to you and me.
You know, in a way, AI was patient. It waited for us to build the foundation it needed. It waited for the data, it waited for the computing power, and it waited for us to have that big aha moment, that shift from programming to training. And now, all those pieces aren't just in place, they're accelerating every single day. Which, of course, leaves us with the biggest question of all. Now that this thing has finally, truly taken off, what happens next?